Hello everyone, welcome back to Real Reds Talk, your home for authentic Manchester football conversation. Today we've got a real treat. We're joined by, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, the senior Manchester United writer at the Manchester Evening News. Is that right?
Yeah, there's been a few moving parts recently at the MEN, a few changes, but yeah, that's the correct title.
Okay, just wanted to double make sure. How's the international break treating you first and foremost before we dive into the topic, Stephen?
Yeah, not bad. I think we all want it to end as soon as it starts, if I'm honest. I wish I was Anthony Joshua, because that fight's just been announced. I've just seen that before we came on air with Jake Paul. He's probably going to get, £40 million for
Unbelievable.
For a 2-minute
Can't
workout.
believe that's happening.
It's not bad if you can get it, but yeah, I'm not as good as Anthony Joshua, but I'm pretty good considering.
Right, well, we're not going to talk about Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua, but we are going to talk sports-related football stuff. So we're going to dive into the article that you published about Ratcliffe and Eric Cantona. I think some really interesting details in on there. We're also going to discuss kind of academy topics, the vision for it, individuals such as Shea Later, recruitment, transfers, and 1 year of Ruben Amorim as well, which, not bad for a Monday afternoon. Yeah, let's dive into it. So the Ratcliffe and Cantona stuff. Basically, you published an article about Sir Jim and use the words being at war, let's just say, with Eric Cantona, which I find it was a very fascinating read, balancing kind of both views. Now, Eric Cantona has publicly accused Ratcliffe of, trying to destroy Manchester United. What do you make of the strength of those words? Because it is quite strong, that, isn't it?
Yeah, the headlines are probably a bit of an exaggeration. I just thought it was really interesting because obviously Eric Cantona has been speaking at events. I think over the last few weeks, he was out in Dublin. He's done an appearance in Manchester and a few other different locations. And he's obviously good value when he speaks. He's very outspoken and he says what he really thinks, doesn't he? So he's always worth listening to. And it's been interesting listening to Eric on Sir Jim Ratcliffe over the last 18 months because he has been very critical. There's been a lot to go at. Ratcliffe has copped a lot of flack, and deservedly so. Ticket prices, etc., the mass redundancies, and Cantona's latest quote was, as you've just said, the use of the word "destroyed." I thought was interesting. It caught my attention, so I thought I'd just write a little opinion piece, a bit of context. Where tasks, well, obviously doing stories and putting those out during the week, but we'll also give our opinions on the latest ongoings. And as you said, international break. There's not a huge amount to go at. So when I saw those quotes, I thought, yeah, that'll do.
Yeah,
that'll
absolutely.
Do for, I think it was a Wednesday afternoon or something like that. So it's Ratcliffe when he turned 70 the other year. You received the video that his colleagues have put together of players from past and present kind of saying happy birthday. Sir Alex Ferguson had contributed, David Beckham had contributed, Cantona had contributed. Cantona is his favourite player, and so much so that when he invested into the football club last year, and obviously it was signed off in February 24, the company that was set up was called Trawlers Limited, obviously a reference to Cantona's speech. So I just think it's interesting the fact that Cantona is Ratcliffe's favourite player, and yet in the last 18 months, Cantona has been incredibly critical. I'm not sure who your favourite player is currently, but could you imagine them turning around and being very critical of your YouTube channel? It's a bit of a strange one, and perhaps Ratcliffe will have to detach the player who Cantona was and what he did for the club, because probably one of the greatest players in the Premier League of all time, and separate him from the person, because let's face it, they're complete opposites. I mean, Ratcliffe is getting his way for a new stadium. Cantona did not want United to build a new stadium. Ratcliffe lives in a tax-free residence in Monaco. Cantona has lent his support to kind of left-wing causes over the years. As I said, the redundancies, obviously Ratcliffe thought they were necessary, and Cantona's accused him of destroying the club's identity and losing its feel. So it's kind of from Cantona's stance, he's saying what he thinks. He's been very honest. I think a lot of fans will agree with him. You'll not see many fans agree with Cantona because of what he achieved during his time at the football club. Such a wonderful player, but again, just interesting quotes really to read.
I'm always envious of the fans in the 90s because I was born in 95. So I couldn't truly appreciate Cantona for who he was. So I always have to kind of go off reference points and obviously watching clips.
The Premier League, is brilliant for that, isn't it? Plenty of clips of Cantona banging in the goals.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a mention in there of him kind of offering his help to rebuild United and that being kind of rejected. Do you know if Ratcliffe Ineos genuinely engaged with that? Was like a thing on the table at all? Was it kind of dismissed out of hand?
I think it's interesting whenever these takeovers happen, and then you've seen it with the kind of the the stuff from the Middle East at the moment. And when new owners come into the club, there's always talk about getting former players, legends involved. But fair play to Cantona, because that's obviously come from his side. He was actively wanting to help, and actually what that role would have been in the board, I'm not so sure, because it has been Ineos's representatives who have come onto the board. There's kind of been no external members from Ratcliffe's kind of fold and trusted members of staff. In terms of actually what happened there, I'm not sure completely, but that probably does come into it slightly when you read those quotes, because obviously Eric said, look, I offered my help, it was turned down. But let's face it, as I've said, they're complete opposites, and they would have gone in complete different directions. How Cantona sees a football club, how Cantona believes a football club should be run, is definitely different to how Such and Ratcliffe thinks a football club should be run.
Yeah, for sure. Another part that was kind of Sir Alex Ferguson, when it taking a step back, there was a lot kind of mentioned about that. But I kind of feel, I don't know if it's just, if you would agree with this, the club has to evolve at some point, right? It kind of has to move on in some sense. I don't mind having that added stature being there, having legends being involved in whatever capacity that is. But for me personally as a fan, I wasn't overly angry at that. I don't know if you, do you know what I mean?
I think it's completely fair. I think the optics of it initially, when that story came out, naturally everyone, the backs might have been slightly up. It rubs some fans up the wrong way. But when you actually look at it in the cold light of day and look at it objectively, Ferguson doesn't need the money. He's out in Bahrain at the moment, celebrating, loving his horse racing. He's doing all right. He is doing all right. And so he should, because of...
Absolutely.
Yeah, so he should. But it's not the end of the world. I think it was done very amicably. There was no fallout there. He still comes to games. He's still been in the director's box this season when I've been at the matches. So I think you're right. I think sometimes when we see these changes, there can be a resistance naturally to change. But you're right, to bring the club into the future, to get it to where it needs to be, change needed to happen. Change can be uncomfortable, but nonetheless, it does need to happen. I did a lot of reporting on the redundancies at the time, and I'd written a few opinion pieces as well. I think maybe the extent of the changes were harsh. Again, having said that, the organisation, I call it organisation, that's something Ratcliffe would say, the football club was clearly very bloated. There was an internal review of numbers of staff, and there clearly was too many staff members at the club. Okay. But the extent of the cuts, when I've talked to people who have been let go, especially kind of in the academy, which is supposed to be the beating heart of the club, obviously we'll come on to it, I think they probably went a little bit too far. Obviously, Ratcliffe again would argue that it needs to happen, but there's a way to kind of impose change as well and implement it, to go around things, to go about things in the right manner, a bit more sensitively maybe. But look, he's a ruthless businessman. He's built his empire off being ruthless, and sometimes you have to be ruthless when you make changes.
Yeah. What do you make of these debates, the redundancies, stadium plans, rejection, kind of the club soul being brought into it? How does that feed into the overall challenge, kind of reconnecting United with that historical identity? Because there's really, again, it's one of those, and you can kind of see both sides of why they're doing it, streamlining kind of business costs and stuff. I understand that. But can you really run a club like a business, like a chemical company? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd say you can't, because football clubs aren't companies, and they mean a lot more. They're institutions in the community, and they should always belong. They should feel like they should belong to supporters and local fans and season ticket holders. And look, we talk about obviously the fans from afar, and they're valued as well, and they spend the hard-earned cash coming to games and maybe traveling miles. It's important to try to retain that feel. I think with the stadium, there's obviously been a huge debate about that, but again, when you look at the plans that were unveiled earlier in the year and the design from Foster and Partners and the money that's going to be pumped into it, it's going to be a leading facility. It's going to be brilliant. Carrington is so much better now. The 50 million refurbishment, even selfishly from a journalist perspective, there's somewhere to sit, there's somewhere to write your articles. And so we still have to park in the overflow car park, which is kind of a car park attached to the side of it. But the experience is good as journalists. That the food is better, the Wi-Fi works, which is, it sounds silly, but sometimes
no, for a journalist, I mean, Wi-Fi is like vitally important.
Well, exactly. So little things like that, it helps a lot. So again, look, change needed to happen, and at the end of the day, we can talk about redundancies, but changes, about whether they were needed and the manner that they were implemented. But if United are winning on the pitch and they're getting 3 points at the weekend, the conversation around these aspects around the club will quieten, because at the end of the day, football fans want to see their team winning. And if United are challenging for major honours, that will quickly settle down.
Just for people watching and kind of our community, where can they find that article? Is it just on the Manchester Evening News through your profile?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously available on Twitter. It's a bit of a dying platform, Twitter, isn't it?
At a minute, yeah.
Yeah, it's strange because of Elon Musk's changes. I've actually got a blue tick recently just because I was talking with some colleagues and thinking, right, like the algorithm and how it actually puts articles into the feed. I think a lot of the time, historically, we'd all be in following, wouldn't we? But now a lot of it's coming up in the For You section on Twitter. But yeah obviously available on Twitter to follow us, and then I'll post all my articles on there. But obviously the MEN's website as well.
Yeah, good stuff. I've seen quite a bit of stuff about the academy as well. A couple of exciting things, a couple of very interesting things. For you, just again, this can be like a personal kind of opinion. How do you feel that's shaping up overall at the moment? Obviously, you're a lot closer to it than myself. You've seen talents like Shea Lacer training with England, little bits like that. But on the pitch at the minute, I don't know whether that's due to, just because we're in the Premier League, we're not seeing many kind of academy players being including the likes of Kobbie Mainoo, which is a huge talking point in itself. Yeah, what for you, the academy, the future that they're building there, does it seem interesting to yourself?
Yeah, it has changed, and it is changing a lot. And again, because of Ratcliffe's changes, Nick Cox's departure was obviously huge. His tenure was hugely successful. An FA Youth Cup in 21-22, some really good youth signings. And I think, again, and I've said this on our podcast a few times now, but I think what people don't realise is how many players United's academy produce for the football pyramids. And look, players might not go on to achieve their dream of playing at Old Trafford and breaking into the first team, but if they go on and have a career in the Championship or in League One or League Two, that's still success. Look, the ultimate aim of the academy, as you just said, is to produce players for the first team. This season, it's going to be inevitably way more difficult because there are fewer fixtures. There is no European football. They crashed out the Carabao Cup second round against Grimsby. We'll try not to talk about that too much. So there's fewer chances for young players. Perhaps at the end of the season, we'll see them given a bit more of a chance. Let's hope Champions League qualifications wrapped up, for example. In that scenario, you could maybe see more players given opportunities, but it's going to be difficult for Ruben Amorim until then. You've seen it with Kobbie Mainoo, you've seen it with Joshua Zirkzee. I think they've played 5 hours between them this season. Mainoo's only started once in the Cup. Zirkzee's not even started at all. So if these are first team players and they're struggling for minutes, it's obviously going to have a knockdown effect on academy players. That is benefiting a few, I'd like to believe, because if you look at Chida Obi, who was around the first team last season, I think it was 7 first team appearances. He wasn't ready to be starting each week for the first team. He wasn't ready to be playing each week for the first team. This season has given Obi a chance to reset, develop away from the spotlight, improve his game in a less pressured environment. You can tell when you watch him each week, every other week, that he's benefited from it. He's looking sharper. He still needs to improve his game off the ball. There's a lot of work out of possession that he clearly needs to improve. And when I've spoken to Travis Binion, he said, look, this lad is still got it. And Travis Binion is the interim manager. He's got a huge ceiling. He's still got a long way to go. And he's learning. He's still learning. You can see that when you watch him. So I think there's a few players in the under-21s, potentially 4 or 5, I would say, who have first-team potential. Shea Lacy, as you mentioned, Bendito Mantato. I'd like to believe Godwill Kakunki as well will eventually be around it again. He was around it at the start of Amram's tenure last year, around this time last year, actually, when Amram came in from Sporting. You've got JJ Gabriel, who was just 15 turned.
Can we speak about him as well, JJ Gabriel?
Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of noise being made about him at the moment, isn't there? I have to admit, I've only seen clips. I've only seen bits and bobs. I'm not sure about yourself. How special is this kid?
So I put out an article last month after talking to a few contacts on Gabriel. And again, for a bit of context, I do a lot of academy reporting. The MEN should. I think it's really important to attend all these youth games to give it the coverage it deserves, especially now the club unfortunately can't because of the cuts. So the MEN, I believe, should always be reporting on these youth games as much as possible for local readers. And after talking to a few contacts with JJ Gabriel, I put out this piece. And essentially, it's a long article with information. And I wouldn't usually highlight a player so young, but because of JJ Gabriel's talent and because of his profile, I just felt I had no choice. And I'd said to someone at the club, I went, look, heads up, I'm writing this piece. This is going to go out at the weekend because, again, it's a courtesy thing when a player is so young. But the ship's already sailed with Gabriel. His profile's that big. It is incredible. And it's deserved. He is an amazing talent. you can use these words about young players, and you have to be careful because you don't want to hype them up too much. And
especially United.
Exactly. And we see it all the time. It happens a lot with these players, and that feeds into maybe how they feel about themselves and will it affect their performances, perhaps. But with Gabriel, it's warranted. It does seem like something special. He came on my radar 2 years ago, and I spoke to someone who I trust immensely, and they said, yeah, this kid's different. In the summer, I put this in the article at the time, there was a meeting to keep him at Carrington. There was another big club in Europe interested, and Omar Parada was involved. Jason Wilcox were involved. And look, that tells you all you need to know. If these figures at United, the top members of staff are getting involved with a teenager in his future, they think the world of him. And when you watch him and you see clips, I think there's a few bits and pieces of footage of himself training at home that go on social media, and his touch of the ball is exquisite. He'll go around a racing track with a tennis ball and do 1,000 little kicky-ups.
Wow.
His finishing, he's a natural finisher. He's quick. He's got it all. He's a brilliant dribbler. So look, it's going to be perhaps a challenge to keep him because his talent is known around the world, and I'm not even exaggerating with that. The biggest clubs in Europe want him. Why wouldn't you want a player of that ability? Of course you would. And obviously there's a window of opportunity when he's 16 that he could potentially leave the club. So look, you'll develop for the next 18 months and carry on doing what he's doing. He's in the right place at the moment. Will he leave? I'm not so sure. Hopefully he stays. And it's all about showing these players a pathway. If JJ Gabriel sees a pathway to the first team, believes he can get into the first team, you'll want to stay. He took part in first team training a few weeks ago, just 15 years old, incredible. So they're trying to show him that pathway, and that's obviously really important.
It's crazy. You know, you see names like Max Dowman and obviously Mal being a massive one at Barcelona, but the age, I think what I was doing at 14, 15, I just find it absolutely crazy. Probably nothing professional at 14, 15 I was doing.
Trying to message girls, getting ignored. And
getting ignored.
That's what most 15-year-olds are doing. Max Dowman, fantastic football. I was down at the Emirates in March for the FA Youth quarter-final between United and Arsenal. Dowman was breathtaking. You could tell about the talent what he was. And that's sometimes when you watch these players at such a young age, they stand out. I followed Kobbie Mainoo a lot before he broke into the team. I was going to Fleetwood. I went to a few different, I think it was Ball and a few different places, long car journeys in the Papa John's, it was formerly known as. And Mainoo was fantastic, and you could see he stood out.
Always playing above as well, aren't they?
Yeah, and that's the big difference, playing above their age group. So yeah.
Yeah, insane. Just to kind of wrap up on the academy section, have you noticed, obviously, I think Stephen Torpe, right, who's come in as the new head, is he kind of settled in yet and operating, or is it kind of still kind of a process at the minute?
I'll blow my own trumpet and say I broke that one, and I think it was that he was being considered to replace Nick Cox, which look, again wasn't a surprise because Jason Wilcox is now pulling the strings, and he essentially wanted his members of staff into the club. And look, Nick Cox got a better offer. He's now technical director at Everton, but it felt like natural change to happen. What was the question again? I've waffled on there.
No, sorry. I was saying the process now of the academy has much changed, and has Stephen.
Yeah, so then Stephen Torpey's come into the club. Obviously achieved a lot of Manchester City, was brought in at Brentford to improve their academy status. In terms of what he's actually done so far, I'm looking forward to sitting down with him because we've not yet had an opportunity to do so. He's been at youth games when I've been there. He's sat alongside Jason Wilcox at Old Trafford when he was unveiled, which was start of October, September time. He was in the director's box sitting there. He was down at Barnsley when I was there the other week, sitting next to Wilcox again. But in terms of his actual impact, we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to see. And it will be interesting. I think from the murmurs that I've heard over the last year, there is a clear change of policy. Nick Cox, I was told, did not want the academy to become a cash cow. When you spoke to him, you could genuinely feel his passion for youth development. It came across. Now, I'm not saying people who have come into the club now do not care about that. Of course they do, but perhaps priorities are shifting slightly with raising cash in mind. With especially in this PSR world, academy sales are incredibly important. Yeah, but look, United need to improve in that sense, and that will be 100% part of Stephen Torpey's job. He needs to get more money from academy sales, but the club has been built on promoting youth. It's been built on giving young players opportunities. This academy record, it's gone on for 88 years of having an academy graduate in every squad. And I hope that's not lost. I hope we still see a genuine investment in these young players, that these young players can still get into the first team and they're not just sold and shifted out into the lower leagues, because that's so important for me. That can't be lost. That's what United's all about.
Yeah. Sometimes when I see a player included, I feel like they're doing it just for the sake of it at times, so they don't lose that record. I'd rather them get minutes or see something, 10, 15-minute cameo, because when we're bringing on, no disrespect to some of the senior players at the minute, but when they're bringing them on, they're not having much of an impact themselves. So I don't see the risk, if you're already 2-0 up or whatever it is, which isn't very frequent at the minute. It's very kind of,
well, it's been a good last month, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been a good, decent form, but I don't know. I'm craving more minutes as a fan. That's what the club's about, and I'd like to see a bit more of that. I'm just going to switch camera because my camera's dying, so just move over to this one. That's why you have a backup, because you can't trust batteries. We'll move on from the academy. Obviously, it's a huge part of the club, but recruitment, likewise, is, if you're building for the future, it's hugely important. What have you made of it so far? You mentioned like Wilcox and Omar Barada. That for me personally, it feels like there's more trust. When I see him going in for a player, I see like how well Le Mans has done. I see the Premier League players that have come in. It seems a lot different now, and it seems like the players are actually having an impact immediately as soon as they're coming in.
Yeah, actually, I copped some flat myself on Twitter, I think, in the summer, because when they'd signed Kuna and Burmo, Sesko and Lomans, 250 million, excluding add-ons.
Yeah.
I think I said, look, I thought it was an impressive window. And I think some fans had said, we completely disagree. We needed a midfielder. And look, they did need a midfielder, but looked at certain priorities and wanted to overhaul the attack, brought in Sesko and Lomans. And in a dream world, United would have signed a midfielder in the summer. But look, they've got to play off the cards that have been dealt. That's the players they decided to sign. And I thought it was a good window. If you go back to last year, it's a bit more mixed, isn't it? Yoro, Mazwari, Delit, very good signings, I like to believe. Xerxes and Ugarte, you'd have to put them in the disappointing category now. Ugarte's really struggled this season. Xerxes, maybe a bit harsh to say that because he's not had a kick. But again, he's been overlooked because of his quality and he doesn't look capable of leading the attack. He could play in the number 10 roles, but now you've got Kuna and in Burmo, then Mason Mount's ahead of him as well. So it's not a surprise to see his situation. So look, Jason Wilcox has been heavily involved in recruitment. He was kind of the de facto sporting director before getting the job. He was doing aspects of that role before he was officially given the title. So was kind of involved with it last summer. This summer, I think it has improved. I don't think you can look at one of those signings so far and say it's a bad addition. Obviously, Sesko, there's been some scrutiny around Sesko in the last few weeks. 2 goals, first goal against Brentford, followed that up against Sunderland. And there was obviously the Gary Neville comment after Nottingham Forest. Well, it's interesting because I asked Amram about it at the press conference and said, what do you think? And he laughed as he answered. Before he answered, he started to laugh. So kind of read into that what you want. But when he answered, he said, look, it's a fact that Sesko has struggled. He said, I've got no doubt that he'll become a success. He showed us a lot more potential than I thought he had. So he was very positive. But it was interesting to hear.
Very honest.
He has struggled, as usual, because he's very good.
Yeah.
I'm hesitant to say that he struggled. I agree. I think he's been fine, hasn't he? I think you'd like more goals than 2. There's no denying that. But to say he struggled might be being a bit exaggerating that. I just think he's probably performing how we expected. No experience in the Premier League. His link-up play is good. His movement's good. He's technically a better footballer than Rasmus Højlund. We saw that with the Cruyff turn against Brighton when he assisted in Burmo. There's been some really good signs from Sesko, and I believe he'll come good. Look, again, it would have been perfect if United had signed a 20-goal a season striker. The market was difficult in the summer. Ollie Watkins was perhaps the other target. He's struggling this season. So
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
Look at Liam Delap as well. We've linked Liam Delap. Obviously, I know he's had an injury as well, but they've not put more up than what Shesko's done in terms of goals contributions, really. I know Villa have just started getting going now. But I don't know. I've followed Sesko for quite a while because I know we've been linked with him heavily. We've been scouting him for a long, long time. And whenever I watched him at Leipzig, I could see there was a player there. I think he's going to be exciting. Like, he's still raw, obviously. Like you touched on his first touch at times. I thought as soon as he come in, it was an immediate improvement on Rasmus Højlund immediately, and you could play into him. And when you have that, you saw the performance. Like, for example, I know he didn't start the game against Liverpool, but when you have Mbeumo and Cunha in those pockets and behind, it's just a different tactical element altogether. and I can see why they've brought him in. But that was more from Christopher Favell, who was pushing that move, right?
Obviously knew him from being in the Red Bull system. I think it's time on the ball. He'll learn. Because you're not going to get that extra half second in the Premier League. I was down at Tottenham, obviously, before the national break, and the chance when he hurt his knee. Yeah, and look, fair play, because Van de Ven's incredibly fast. He's got a lot of pace for a centre-half, and he's probably the only defender in the league who's going to get
quickest
back in that scenario, But having said that, Højlund either needs to bring the ball over with his right and protect the ball with his body, or hit it first time with his left. He needs to be a little bit more intelligent there. So look, there's clearly more to work on. There's been other signings though as well. I think we talked about the academy. The youth signings are really interesting. It's an area where I think United have taken a while to cotton on. We've seen it with other clubs, Chelsea particularly, signing players. Perhaps these players won't even play for Chelsea. They'll be loaned out and kind of flip for a profit. I will caveat that point with these signings that have been brought through the door: Seko Kone, Diego Leon, Kana Biek, who's now out in Switzerland, Cristiano Roscoe, who's due to come in the summer. When these signings happen, we obviously speak to people at the club, and they'll say they're first-team signings. They are players for the future. Not all these players will make it to the first team inevitably. Kone is showing great potential. I think when he fractured his eye socket, really bad timing down at Tamworth, because he was kind of getting in and around it. He went on the tour in pre-season, obviously didn't play, but he's making good progress. But if one of these players can hit the first team, and one of these players can become an established Premier League player, then the strategy's been vindicated. They're signing these players for very low fees. Kone was £1 million. Diego Leon was 3.3. Obviously, some add-ons involved there. Cristiano Roscoe, I'm not exactly sure of the fee, but again, don't think it was too much. Kana Biek, United were very clever, were proactive in the market, signed him on a free transfer. He was in the final year of his deal out in France. So it's intelligent operating, and United hadn't really made too many of these transfers from afield, from afar. They're tapping into kind of a new market in South America. These players are very you bring them in for very low fees, and if you get it right, it can pay off hugely. So I think that's great to see. And hopefully a few of these players do reach the first team. Hopefully that happens.
Yeah, I remember seeing how true it is, I'm not entirely sure, but players like Caicedo or Šeško years ago, where we've been linked with them or been offered them as players, and we've
the Caicedo was genuine. That was right. United were interested in the kind of gawk at the agent fee that was quoted. I think it was around £4 million at the time, but the agent fee was a few million itself. So look, again, you look
hindsight's an easy thing.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a lot of money that for a player who's improving. Yeah. Brighton took the risk; it paid off.
Yeah, I'd love a Caicedo right now. I'll tell you that for free. Yeah, ultimately, just to kind of wrap the show up, it all falls down to one man who has certainly had a roller coaster of a ride, but continued backing and support from the fans, which I think has been great to see, especially in today's climate in football. What have you made of his time so far? You were speaking about him with the media and speaking to yourself, how he is. Do you think he's got it, this one? Do you think he's the one?
It's the $1 million question, isn't it? It's after every manager, is this manager the one? It's been an excellent 6 weeks, and it looked incredibly unlikely, didn't it? After Grimsby, after Manchester City, I think the stats, the Amram's body language, some of the individual errors and performances, it all kind of pointed towards a manager coming to the end of his time. I thought I was down at Brentford, the 3-1. It was a big setback. It was, but I said this on our podcast as well. I think the reaction in the media, and I'm part of that, maybe went a little bit too far. I tried to remain very level-headed.
Yeah,
I personally didn't feel that performance felt like a sacking performance. You've seen it over the years, sometimes with United, like Solskjaer, with City and Liverpool and Watford, these kind of games. And I mean, he don't know how he survived those two matches. Finally, was part of his misery against Watford. But you feel these kind of games, and Ten Hag, ironically, that West Ham game after he was sacked, that didn't really feel like a sacking game, but the weeks building up to that, it did. I didn't think that performance felt like Amram should be sacked. I felt there was reason to give him more time. He'd been backed heavily in the summer transfer window. I didn't think they had to make a decision at that stage, at that junction. They've persisted, and it's paid off. Some brilliant performances, some really good wins. That Anfield performance, I think there should be chants created about Harry Maguire's winner. It was that good. Yeah. I was there. Brilliant game to report on. it's been uplifting reporting on positivity. And this is kind of a myth. I think some fans probably think journalists want bad results and feed off negativity, but views actually go up when United win, and it's better to write about it. The access is better. We get to speak to the players more. So everything's more positive. It's more uplifting. In terms of Abraham himself, look, he's done so well. You've got to tip your hat to him for this turnaround, but he's now got to build on it. We said that after Liverpool. We said that after Brighton, right? Can they keep going? They would have liked to have started November better than they have, undoubtedly. Obviously, Nottingham Forest game and Tottenham were very similar, starting those second halves pretty badly. I think the defensive record now is the next thing that needs to improve. That'll be the next indicator of progress. They're leaking too many goals and to move up the Premier League table.
Right, I think we've got.
And I broke it down because Lomans, is it 7 goals in 5 games or 8 goals in 5 games that he's conceded? And look, Senna Lomans has been brilliant. And if he's conceded 8 or 7 goals, I can't remember what it was in 5 games. That just shows you that collectively there's a problem there because he's made a lot of good saves. That is not his fault at all. So
the Tottenham game in general, the one from Romero and Polina was unbelievable.
The Romero save was brilliant. I actually thought the second one from Polina was better because he saw it late. He reacted really well. He uses his body brilliantly, I think. I spoke to a coach who worked for Club Bruges that spoke about how hardworking he is. He just seems incredibly normal. Does his work in the gym, kind of plays golf at the weekend. He's just a very normal guy. When he came out the Anfield dressing room, I was down in the mix zone before the press conference, and he was walking past us. Senna, could I have a few minutes to have a chat, please? He said, yeah, of course, no worries. And he's 23 years old, and he's willingly spoken to us there. And look, a lot of players, understandably, they can't be bothered to speak. They don't want to speak. But he took a few minutes and spoke. It was appreciated that. And it showed his maturity, I thought, to take the initiative to come over and speak. So it was good to speak to him. He's made a big impression, and he's been crucial to this turnaround for Amram. Huge. And Kuna and Mbeumo have been huge. They've been transformational signings for me. The United struggled to score goals last season. I think it was 44 as a team in the Premier League. Yeah. That was so disappointing. They scored 19 already in the league this season, and those signings have been key. But again, it's been very good, but they need to continue improving because let's face it, they need to get back in the Champions League.
Yeah, well, he's got a decent run of fixtures, hasn't he, when he come back from the international break. I think statistically the easiest 5 games out of any team when we return. Yeah. So that'd be super interesting. Just a little side note story about Son Lamons. I didn't realise I was sat next to him the other day at golf for about an hour. And I didn't realise he was there at American Golf in Trafford. I was just like, people were going over, and I was like, I don't know who that is, because he was kind of with his back turned to me. I think he was sat with his girlfriend or wife, I'm not entirely sure. And people were kind of going over getting pictures, and I was like, I don't know who that is. And then he stood up, and then you kind of see the stature, and I was like, oh, right, okay. But I don't like minding people.
By the traffic centre, then, is it?
Yeah, right by the traffic centre.
It's the queues to get in there. I think Lomans will eventually realise to go somewhere else because the queues to go to the driving range there are ridiculous.
Busy. Very busy. But yeah, anyway, sorry. Away from golf. Listen, really appreciated this chat. I think you've explained everything really well in detail as well. I agree with a lot of your opinions, and we follow your work continuously as well over on our socials and on the YouTube channel. So any other bits and bobs coming up at all over the international break? I mean, we've got 5 days until the weekend, haven't we? So
yeah, I think just now, obviously, the January transfer window's around the corner. So a few stories in the next few weeks, inevitably, hopefully, on plans. You've got Kobbie Mainoo there. You've got Joshua Zirkzee, as I mentioned. Likely they will request to leave on loan again. I think the indication is currently that it might be unlikely because you've got Ahmad and Mbeumo, Mazraoui going to AFCON. They're seen as important squad players. I was told 2 months ago, Mainoo is working so hard. He's doing extras in training. He's even changed his personal chef at home. He's doing all he can to change Amram's mind, but he's just not playing. And if you put yourself in these players' shoes, you can understand when the January window comes around, especially in the World Cup, exactly why they might want to leave. And then loans as well. There might be a few more loans from the academy, so watch out for those stories on Twitter and whatnot, and on the website. Perhaps some recalls will be considered. I'm not sure. I was having a look today in detail at how everyone's doing. Eli Harrison is at Shrewsbury. Someone is taking his starting place, another young goalkeeper. So maybe I'll have to check, but maybe that could be an option to recall him. There'll be a few bits and pieces, but it's always a busy time there, isn't it? Because the games come thick and fast, and then you've got the window after that.
Yeah, December and January is typically chaos, especially with Manchester United. So I really appreciate your time. I've enjoyed this conversation thoroughly. So love to have you on again at any point, maybe after the window or something when things have cooled down. But for anyone watching, please do go check Stephen's work out. Manchester Evening News, Twitter. He's already explained all the links and stuff. And Manchester is Red, right, on YouTube.
I think, to be fair, I mean, it is on YouTube, Spotify and Apple and one on. It's the same. It's all good audio platforms, isn't it?
Yeah,
good.
all good audio platforms. That's the one.
All the bad ones as well.
Yeah. If you are watching, please do subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video for us, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.